to episode 2 of Jeppe Stories, or the JBA podcast. Today we have Mr. Kevin Tait, and as always will be hosted by Chad. We hope you enjoyed our last episode. We look forward to seeing what's in store. So over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's an honor to have you here. We're just going to start off with some quick fire questions, just to those listening who may not know you. So first off, which year did you matriculate in the black and white?
1967, it was a lifetime ago.
Which house were you in when you matriculated?
I was in Kudu, the Greens.
Upon matriculating, did you have any colours? And if so, what were the colours and in what?
No, but I'll tell you a story about that later. I always talked of myself as being an ordinary Jeppe boy. I played in the third 11, I played in the third hockey team, and I was chairman of the SCA. Yeah.
Awesome. And then your favourite school to play against during your time as a Jeppe boy?
Definitely King Edward's. They served by far the best tea.
And then looking further down the line, favourite school to play against as a headmaster?
Yes, I thought a lot about that. I think it would be Pretoria Boys. And partly it's that I was born in Pretoria and I lived there subsequently as well. But my in-law family, the Hofmeyers, have very strong roots at Pretoria Boys. My wife's grandfather was the founding headmaster there. And there was one of the uncles there, one of the uncles at King Edward's, one of the uncles at her father at Potch and at Jeppe. So they made a very big impact as a family on the Milner schools. And it's something we're all very proud of.
Moving into our more long format questions. Those that do know you, Mr. Tait, will know that you obviously spent time as a Jeppe boy. You then progressed into headmaster. So I have to ask, how did your view of the school change from a Jeppe boy to a Jeppe headmaster? And how would you say those two views compare to your view of Jeppe today?
So that's an interesting thing, because I think the average Jeppe boy has no idea of the privilege that he has and he experiences when he's here. And I think that would have been true of me as well. I didn't realize why my dad was so keen for me to come here. I wrote an entrance exam to get into Jeppe. Interesting in those days. He'd been at Muir College, not the whole of his high school career, but he really wanted me to come to a boys' school. And I think that was an amazing legacy that he gave me, because it was something that definitely, we talk about how the school shapes us. And as I look back, I think the school really did, even though I wasn't like a first team player or anything. And I think one has to think as well, when you're at our position now, very few boys are first team players. The real school is in the middle there somewhere. And I was definitely part of that.
So, sir, we were thinking, looking back from our first episode with Mr. Jackson, who was also a headmaster at Jeppe, we were thinking, how can we improve on the questions? And one of the suggestions that you actually provided us with was, how would you best describe Jeppe to your partner? It's a very interesting question.
So it's a really fun question. It was Tyron Sharnock who talked to me about that right at the time when he was head boy. And it's one of those things, there's an indescribable quality to Jeppe that other people don't really understand. And so trying to explain it to your partner or your wife is quite a challenge. But I think it's got something to do with the mystique around the school. When Professor Jonathan Jansen visited us at the time, now this is quite a while ago, he referred to us as that fabled high school. And I think about that fabled high school. What is that? Now, when you talk about something as being fabled, you're talking about the stuff of legend. You're talking about something that people talk about. They may not really know everything about it, but there's something people out there know, that we at Jeppe have got something special. And I think that's developing that theme that would be really useful in terms of what one would do with these talks. What is it that makes us the fabled high school in Professor Jonathan Jansen's eyes? And I think what one finds is that we're a really well-known school. People know about Jeppe. It's got something to do with the brand. It's got something to do with the badge. It's got something to do with people like Jake White. People have heard of us. And it's building on that kind of capacity that I think makes such a big difference. And when you look back and you look at the school itself, it's got something to do with the building. It's got something to do with where we're situated. It's got something to do with our roots. So it's a whole lot of indefinable things. I don't know any other school that talks about their motto like we do. I mean, it's a thing. I know Jeppe boys have got the 40 Neil difficulties on their screensavers. That's what they wake up to every day. That's what they think. It inspires them. I had Well, it was a privilege in a way. I was visiting a little Jeppe boy in hospital who'd had a very bad leg injury. And I said to him, my boy, how's it going? He said, sir, my motto keeps me going. No, he didn't have to say that. It's just that was inbuilt. And so that's part of it. All these things come together. And I'm very proud of the fact that we are known as the fabled high school. We have a big reputation out there.
But do you agree that sometimes that fabled high school carried the wrong impression to a lot of people? We were always known sometimes that we might not win the game, but we'll definitely win the fight. So it certainly has various connotations. And just coming back to the first question around, as a boy, as a headmaster, and now the differences that you've seen in terms of potentially, certainly while I was there, I was a schoolboy when you were headmaster. We certainly had quite a negative reputation. It was a difficult time at that stage because we were working on this transition, and we certainly had a very poor reputation as being the kids from the other side of the track. So it's had various iterations over time. So just coming back quickly, maybe touch on, as a schoolboy, understanding all the privilege that we had and where it was as a headmaster and where you believe it is now.
So as a schoolboy, I was unaware that we might have had a poor reputation. So at the time, I don't think that was something we thought about a lot. During the 60s, we had quite good rugby sides. In my matric year, and I played hockey, so I have no credit for this, we had an outstanding rugby side. So I think people were able to feel, especially on the sports field, that we were holding our own. We didn't really play serious hockey yet. Hockey only started then. You could only play hockey when you were in Form 3, so you couldn't even play it as a junior. But when I was here as the headmaster, it really was a challenge for me to overcome the reputation that we earned for ourselves on the sports field. And it's something I fought against a lot. And I don't know, I don't know what the boys saw in it, but I had a lot of input into the rugby sides. I used to say to the referee, I'm not interested in the score. I want to know how many yellow cards there were. I said to the referee, which of our boys let us down, in the scrum? The ref knows who's playing to the rules and who isn't. And I think the boys resented that a bit, but we overcame that. I don't think there's the same negative reputation at the moment. And I don't think it's only got to do with the buildings and things. I think it's got to do with the sports out there. And I suppose it's a challenge when you lose a lot. When you lose those games, then you need to identify yourself in some other kind of a way. And I think we were in that space. And we came out of an era where some of our very famous rugby players were very dirty. And I don't want to name that, but it's not a good reputation for the kind of Jeppe that I wanted to be the headmaster of. And I'm delighted that we really are past that, on the whole.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Awesome. So, sir, you made mention to the fact that as Jeppe boys, you take so much pride in our motto. Speaking of courage and bravery, you married the daughter of your former headmaster. So could you please just speak to that experience and the courage needed to do it?
Well, it wasn't as serious as it sounds, because I only met her after I left school. But my father-in-law was my headmaster in matric. So that was very funny, very humorous. But I did feel a lot of pressure, and I mentioned the Hofmeyr family. I did feel a lot of pressure in keeping the legacy, the reputation of the Hofmeyrs intact. And I think it's something that I've aspired to. Mr. Hofmeyr was a great headmaster in many ways. He was very different from other headmasters. He was, I refer to him as the Renaissance man. He played rugby in the front row for Western Transvaal. Okay? He reffed the All Blacks versus New Zealand game in 1955. It was considered the 5th Test match. But he had an organ licentiate from London. He played the organ. He ran the choir. So he was a completely different kind of person to what one would expect in the sort of the role of one or the other. And I think he had a big impact on people at that time, especially on the musical side.
Sure. So no pressure.
Well, when I asked him for his daughter's hand in marriage, that was quite a tough time. I think it is for any guy.
So speaking to your time at Jeppe from 1963 to 1967, correct? what would you say is the biggest difference when walking around the school today compared to your time as a boy in the black and white?
So I think there are lots of developments. The campus is a really obvious one. And you know, I worked quite a lot on the history of the school, the 125 book and so on. It's interesting to see time and time again how the campus was mentioned as a challenge. In those days, it was the Department of Public Works. It theoretically is still now, but the fact that schools have been able to spend their own money on the projects that they have has transformed our campus. There are lots of other changes as well. We had one lady staff member when I was a boy that taught me. Now more than half the staff are ladies. And I think many times they're better teachers, they're better administrators, and so the whole curriculum side of the school runs better. I think it was quite common to hear people saying in my kind of era, ever since I left Jeppe, it's gone down. It's going to the dogs. The school has never been like it was. But that was never ever true. So even when I was here, there were so many things here that were miles better than when I was at school. Just take curriculum choices, for example. I had almost no curriculum choice. If you took Latin or you took geography, like that was it. You didn't have all the subject offerings that you had now. You didn't have the array of sports facilities. You didn't have all these competitive tours and things. You might have had a touring team come up for the first 15. But taking the whole school down on a tour, 1,000 boys, we didn't do that, ever. So I think that it's the memory of, how good it wasn't. And also remember in those days, corporal punishment was very severe. So we got jacked all the time. Even good boys got jacked. The whole class would get jacked. And we used to think that was the way you did a discipline, and to change that. So in my era, the new Schools Act came in. And so corporal punishment, for instance, was abolished. And I think it was a huge transition for many teachers. They'd never learned how to discipline. They just jacked. And some people think that's better, but long-term, psychologically, sociologically, it's not better. So I think that's quite an important change that would happen. And then I think we've got a magnificent campus now. So I'm saying I haven't heard for a long time somebody saying, oh, the school was better than when, because I think it would be fair to say, and I think I have more insight into this than many, I don't think the school has ever gone better than it's going now. I can't speak for the 30s and the 40s, but it was a tough time. It was the war. We had staff members in war. We had staff members dying. We had boys dying. It was a tough time. And the school now is going brilliantly.
I think it's the nature of anybody will always look back on their time and think that it was better when they were there. I guess, my challenge to other old boys is to come spend some time here. It's easy to say it on the face of it without having spent time here. I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time here, and I can categorically say it's in a much better place from a campus perspective.
But in every respect.
In every respect. I think that, certainly as a schoolboy and when you were headmaster, I don't think you had the support of the old boys like the school's got now with the JBA, spending a fortune of time and money and effort trying to bring this alumni in and closer and creating the development that we've got. So it certainly is, I would agree with you. I think that the nature of any schoolboy is you always reflect on the time that you were there and you make, it's not an apples and apples comparative. So it's not a everybody loved it when they were there. And there invariably will be changes. I mean, when I walk around Sesebe, I think to myself, how lucky are these kids? But I loved my time at Sesebe. We didn't have half the luxuries that these kids have now, but it's not to say it was right or wrong. That's got to be the natural progression. I think that's what some guys have to just get out of and come and spend the time and come and see what we've been able to create here collectively as an organisation, whether it is at the school, whether it is JBA, whether it is Theo Jackson, the trust, the museum project. All of these things about preservation, and this is the very reason that we have about preserving stories of Jeppe. So I think it's always going to be the challenge that guys will have.
Also, in times change, and there's a lot of advantage now that we didn't have at that stage. So when I started as headmaster, for example, there was not one single scholarship at Jeppe. Nobody was on a scholarship. When we communicated with the old boys, we Roniered a letter. Do you know what a Ronier machine is? Okay? It's a duplicator. You do it by hand or you get electric ones. So you'd write a newsletter. Then you would, if you were really lucky, you might have been able to print out labels, and then you stuck them on the envelopes, and then you put stamps on, and then you went and posted them. Now, communicating with the old boys now, you've got a WhatsApp group and it goes to 5,000, 6,000 people.
And Jeppe Connect. Yeah.
Shout out, Jeppe Connect.
So the contact with alumni now is so much easier and so much better, and it really has helped. There's a negative side to social media, but the positive side is that we are in touch with thousands of old boys, and they're very proud of their school, and they want to come and look. And I haven't, as I said, I haven't heard somebody saying it was better then. And if somebody did say that, and you said to them, well, come and look, as you say, come and look. It's brilliant.
There's no question. The social media has allowed us to showcase in real time what we've been able to do with the school and what the school is doing for themselves. So I think I agree with you.
So having been a pioneer and founder of the Ruth First Jeppe Memorial Trust, please just speak to the inception of the trust and the growth over the years, and how it's been able to, just positively impact Jeppe girls.
Yeah, so I was headmaster here still when the Jackson Fund started. So I think that was in about 2005-ish, somewhere around there. And so although it started very small, we established some practices, it was Dale and I, that we were able to piggyback on when I started the Ruth First thing at Jeppe Girls, which was only 2010. So there was a bit of time in between. And I think that we learned some lessons from that were really helpful. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I'd already been involved with a similar scholarship program. I think the biggest difference between the two is that the Jackson Fund doesn't prioritize academics, whereas the Ruth First Trust definitely does, because Ruth First herself was an outstanding academic. And we felt we couldn't have a scholarship program that wasn't a feature. She was also a writer, so she was a journalist. She published 15, 16 books. So we have as one of our entrance criteria, they write an essay. We mark an essay. We want to see, if you want a Ruth First scholarship, you need to be able to write. She was a writer, so even though she was still at school. And I think that that helped us a lot. What really made a difference as well is the name of Ruth First and her reputation. I think the school was really blessed to have somebody who was on the correct side of the political spectrum, whereas for many years she would have been considered not to have. So I used to try and do some fundraising, and you'd go around and you'd say to a potential funder, I'm from Jeppe, let's talk about fundraising, etc., etc. It never worked. They'd say, Jeppe, you guys have got everything. Even though I said to her, do you ever understand what it takes to run a school like Jeppe? Do you know the financing model? They had no clue about those things. But nobody ever said to me when I said I'm from the Ruth First Scholarship Program, nobody ever said, who? You know what? It opened the doors left, right and centre. So it's been an extremely successful program from that point of view. We had 4 girls in 2011. We set our target initially as trying to get 10 a year. That was met about 5 years later. And now there are about 175 girls who've been Ruth First Scholarship recipients, including the current ones. Some of those have done outstandingly well. So we track the alumni, we're in touch with them. Some of them are giving back. They, now regular donors, and we feel we've really done something with that. But what the name of Ruth First has done for us is put us on the map as a girls' school, but also it's the Jeppe brand. Jeppe's Jeppe. I don't think everybody realizes that there are 3 Jeppe schools. They think of Jeppe as Jeppe. Yeah.
So moving into our next question, having spent time as a Jeppe Boys headmaster and a business manager at Jeppe Girls, aside from the obvious differences, what would you say is the biggest similarity when looking at the 2 schools?
So talking about the obvious similarities as well is that it's the colours, it's the badge, and it's the motto. And I think what the schools underestimate a little bit in each other is how seriously they all take that. And I would include Jeppe Prep with that as well. Jeppe Prep was integral to the whole thing. I don't know how many people are aware that right up until about 1890, there was one governing body that ran the 3 Jeppe schools. We unbundled when the new Schools Act was being mooted, and there was the Model B and the Model C. And the way those were constructed, it was not possible legally for one governing body to run 3 schools. But in those days, it was one school. So they had a governing body meeting. It was all 3 schools were present. And so there was a kind of a protection of the 3 schools in terms of the way they operated. They did have subcommittees for each of the schools, but there were meetings that were together. And I think that certainly at Jeppe Girls, and I think pretty much so at Jeppe Prep, they're as committed to the Jeppe brand as the boys' school is. But they might just realize and enhance that commitment slightly differently. So in some ways, the schools are quite different. And it's not only because it's boys and girls. It's just there's a difference in the ethos. But Jeppe Girls are equally proud of their school as a Jeppe boy is. And they have the same aspirational qualities. They've done better academically and culturally, extramurals over the years. And I think the boys' school has worked really hard at catching up on that. And I think that the school academically now is in a much stronger space than when I was here.
Yeah. Just so Jonathan mentioned earlier that Jeppe has this history and this culture that we're looking to preserve. So having that in mind, would you just speak to your role in the Jeppe heritage route and the inception of this route and what it means to you and what it should mean to all Jeppe boys?
So it was a very exciting thing for me to be invited to come and chair the planning committee for the heritage side of the school, because I've done a lot of work in that area, as I mentioned earlier, with the books and various activities that I've been involved with. And I was always interested because I've got quite a lot of institutional memory, because I go back to the 60s. My father-in-law was here, I kept in touch. My daughter was here. We've been very involved in the Jeppe family. So in being asked to take on a project like that was really right up my street, if I could put it that way. And in talking particularly with Rob Katzen, who was the one who was working with me trying to conceptualize what we were doing. So we really were talking about a museum. But part of the museum thing is the realization that the whole school is a historical site. There's huge history here, and not everybody knows it. And so how do you tell it? So we were saying we don't want to do a museum as such. We want to do a heritage site. The museum would be an integral part of that. And that, I hope, is still to come, because it's very much dependent on more funding. But what we were able to do in the meanwhile was to try and build on the whole school's heritage. And so we selected 12 sites around the school that we thought had particular historical merit. And we've designed, and you've probably seen these, and maybe you can get a pick or two of them. So we've got totems, and we've put graphics, we've got text, we've got pictures from that time when we're telling the story, and there's a route. So many people always come from the past, and they come and walk around the school. The Heritage Association walks around the school. People come in and they want to see the fabled school. So now there's a route that they can follow, and I think it's magnificent. And what I really like about it, it's a bit of sort of one-upmanship thing. I haven't seen anything like it anywhere in the world. I haven't been to every school in the world. I've been to some. There's nothing that has a showcase like we have with the Heritage Walk. And I think it tells the story in a brilliant way. It's really first class. It's well done. I'm very proud of it.
So having said that, it's undeniable the beauty and the history of the route. What would you say is your favorite spot on the route?
So I thought a bit about that. It's quite a hard question, but I think it's got to be the Pain Hall. The Pain Hall is at the heart of our school. It wasn't always called that. It was the hall. When I was here as a boy, it was the old hall, because the new hall had just been built just before I arrived. And it's a sacred space. When you walk in there, and I've taken headmasters from other schools there, there's something absolutely magic about the Pain Hall. It's got to do with the double volume, the bay windows, the stained glass, the panels. When I was here as a boy, we had heads of buck in there as well, because, our houses were all buck, of course. So it's the names of the head boys, it's the captains of the sides, it's the photographs. So it's like when Herman Charles Bosman wrote his essay on Jeppe High Revisited, and he walked around in there, he said he couldn't do it without a sense of awe. That is the Pain Hall.
So there is certainly something there that is quite special. You've got the headmaster stairs, because it was always off limits to us. Well, only to the extent that we didn't have, when I started in Standard 6, which is grade 8, the hall had... the new hall had burnt down, so we had to do all assemblies in the Pain Hall. But there's a gravitas in there. There's an energy in there that is even to this day. I still double check my routes to just walk straight through it, because we weren't allowed to. We had to We had to go. We take the long way around, and we in my years we had the badge, which we didn't walk over. We walk around, which is a much newer development than some of the other developments we've had, but certainly that Pain Hall was certainly it's it's a special place to be.
Yeah, and there's some personal aspects to that as well. So our wedding reception in 1976 was in the hall. My daughter's wedding was in the hall. My 50th and 60th birthday parties were in the hall. So you can make that hall, it lends itself to anything. So for my 60th birthday, we dressed it up as a Scottish castle. It was magnificent. Steve Hodge had all his stuff, and he put it up. We had the pipers playing, Highland Cathedral. Brilliant. Yeah, it's a very special place.
So my next question is more so 3 in 1, but what would you say, having such an extensive history with the school, what would you say is your proudest moment as a Jeppe boy, Jeppe headmaster, and just a fan of Jeppe?
So proudest moment as a Jeppe boy, I can't think of anything that stands out. So I've explained to you that I was an ordinary boy. I must say, just so I can blow my own trumpet a little bit, I did finish in the top 10, but it wasn't even a thing in those days. You didn't know. There was nobody that, there were no colours for academics, service awards, nothing like that at all. Those things only came later. And if you look at the history, even the colours blazer was only available to the cricketers for years. The rugby guys wore the black blazer, they didn't wear the colours blazer. So these traditions had to be changed over that period of time. And there isn't anything that really stands out from 1963 to 67 as a great moment for me. I did score a couple of goals, scored a couple of catches in the slips. Nothing grand. When I was headmaster, there were lots of really significant things, I think. Probably the first one I would refer to was the AstroTurf. So in those days, the only Astro around in the whole of Gauteng was Parktown. They got the first Astro. And we were very stretched. In fact, it challenged us financially for years afterwards because some of our funding model didn't work out. But we decided that a second best Astro was not good enough for Jeppe. So we went for a top-of-the-range water-based Astro. And the guy who installed it came out from Turkey as the installer. And when he did the handover with me down on the Astro, he said to me, "Mr. Tait, I would like you to know, as of this minute, this is the best Astro in the world." And it was true. And I was very proud of that. So not a single independent school up here had an Astro yet, and Jeppe and Parktown did. Kesers came more or less at the same time, Pretoria after that. So that was a very, very proud day. We had a very big festive season. Part of it was that the Jeppe first 11 played a Jeppe Springbok hockey team. So there were enough Jeppe old boys around at the time. It's been one of the most successful sports, as you know. Yeah. And even though they were a bunch of old guys, they thumped us. They were Springboks. They were brilliant players. And then in 2003, we developed a Founders' Day kind of tradition, which I think isn't happening as much anymore. But especially in 2003, we celebrated our centenary as a public school. Now, people say, how old is Jeppe? Well, you can start in 1890, you can start in 1896, you can start in 2000. You can look at it in different ways. So we decided that we would celebrate it at that time, and that's when we named the venues. So the Bowden Astro, the Whitefield, they were named at that time. And that was a very special occasion as well. In that particular year, we beat King Edward's at rugby on the home field here. We had the inter-high athletics. You'll remember those. That doesn't happen like that anymore, Jonathan. It's really sad. And it's got to do with competition and marketing from other schools. They felt they couldn't compete. We decided it was our centenary year. We were going to run the best inter-high ever. And we had a very strong parent committee running it, and we put on a brilliant performance. Jeppe, of course, hasn't won it ever. We'd like to think of ourselves as better on the athletics track than that, but we've never won it. I believe that there was a quadrangular we have a triangular with Kes. There was a quadrangular, and we won it in 1952. That was the last time we did anything there. But that was a very special time, a very special year in the life of the school. And I think 1990 had been that as well, when the centenary from 1890. I think the Jeppe boys were here, like Dale, they look back on that year and they think of it as being something really, really special. And then more personal thing, so my proudest moment, it might come as a surprise. So it probably happened at my final assembly when the school was saying farewell to their headmaster. So I had often referred to, I think one of the hardest days in my life as a headmaster was the days that should have been the best days. It was the day we announced colours and we announced prefects. So you'd read off these lists, and you'd get to the end, and then there would be a boy who didn't make it, or a prefect who wasn't, maybe he had an aspiration of being a prefect. So I would console the boys at an assembly often and say, guys, I was just an ordinary Jeppe boy, I didn't get colours, I wasn't a prefect, but my name's on the headmaster's board. There's life after colours, guys. This isn't a setback, this is going to be a motivation for you. It's going to drive you. So I quite often talked about that. And in my final assembly, I tried to sum up my nearly 10 years at the school, and I referred to that again. And there was a movement around in the hall. There's something, I realized I'd said something wrong, or had I blotted my copybook? Was my fly open? It was one of those feelings. Something had happened. But I had to carry on, and I carried on, and I finished my speech. They all gave me a clap and everything. And then it came the moment when the boys were going to present me with my farewell gift. So they arrived there in a frame, a Jeppe colours blazer. And they said, sir, you did get colours.
Right.
And they awarded me colours for service. It was an extremely emotional moment. And the only one. I mean, people like Dale got their colours the right way. I got mine in that way, and it was very, very moving experience. So, my proudest moment at Jeppe.
Jeez.
Wow.
Well, what a great way to end. But I think we're looking to end with a concluding question that we ask every guest who's coming on the Stories of Jeppe podcast. And that question is, so what is the greatest thing Jeppe has taught you?
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit because I didn't answer the third part of your question just now, if I may. Now, as a retired headmaster and as a passionate old boy, what I think the campus developments at the school are absolutely magnificent. And although, we've always been the school on the wrong side of the railway tracks, one of the motivations for going for a top-of-the-range Astro was that it shouldn't be like that. We aren't second-class citizens. We're the best. If you're the best, you need to have the best. And I think the Innovation Centre, and I just went and looked at the Art Centre yesterday, they are magnificent. They are world-class facilities. Wait till you see the museum. So I'm very proud of those.
So just the downside to the Astro is, as a fellow third-team cricketer, and used to be played cricket on the cabbage patch, where you can block a ball and go for 4. I lost the opportunity to make many half and full centuries on that small little field. That used to be a cricket field. It was long before you were born, I think.
Yeah.
You could get a 6 off your gloves.
There, across from the Astro at the top, where there's parking now.
No. Where the Astro is, that was a cricket field.
Wow.
Yeah.
The cricket nets were on the top.
We call it the cabbage patch.
So just go back to your question.
My question is, so what is the greatest thing that Jeppe has taught you?
So I think from the time of being a Jeppe boy, I've always been proud of it. So I think Jeppe enabled me, and I think I came from fairly humble origins like nearly every Jeppe boy. It enabled me to believe in myself, it gave me a school to believe in, and it enabled me to walk tall. And I think now, especially more true than at any other time, Jeppe can hold its head high as one of the great South African schools. And I think that's what you want to aspire to. You want to be a great South African school. And I think we've done really well in that direction. There's one other thing that I'm really pleased about as well, and it's an interesting thing because it's a little bit off the radar, but I'm very excited about how many Jeppe old boys, especially from my era, and I might not know of the others, but have gone into education and are doing extremely well. So we just heard the other day that Brendan McCann has become the headmaster of the international school in the Seychelles. We've got, I think, 6 or 7 deputy heads around the schools at the moment that are Jeppe boys, or were young staff members when I was here. So they're mostly at independent schools, which is quite interesting. Be careful, Jeppe's taking you. Yeah.
we did ask Dale a question, and maybe it's more for my own, for our own sort of JBA. But if there's some boys who didn't enjoy Jeppe like maybe we did. what would you say to those boys who don't necessarily have that passion for the school as we do, in respect of what their view of the school is now? I mean, how would you get them or entice them to come back and see what we're doing, to get them to come and spend time here?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, because I've always been sad when I've heard about people who didn't have a great time here. I think, wow, what happened? And sometimes they maybe were bullied, maybe they felt out in some other kind of way, and they weren't incorporated. And I think I worked quite hard, and I think it's true now, is that I believe every Jeppe boy can have a place in the sun. You don't have to play in the first 11 to be a proud Jeppe boy. And if you can find that niche, and I think that's what's so nice about the very wide extramural program and things now. I mean, you can get colours for orienteering. Well, what is that? I mean, we didn't even know what that was. It's a sport for academics.
Gaming as well.
There's gaming. So there are all those things where you can succeed. And I always like to encourage a person to say, you need to find your place in the sun at Jeppe and shine in your own little way. Also, I think there's something deep inside a Jeppe boy that makes you want to come back even if you were unhappy. And I've had some interesting experiences of that. I think the main one was Mr. Birch. Mr. Birch was the Anglo-American architect. He was never married. He left the school in 1932. He arrived outside my office in a Jeppe blazer that he'd bought in McCulloch's in Hyde Park. And he sat out there, and we discovered that he'd never been back to the school. He was the most unhappy Jeppe boy. But now he was dying, he was old, and he had a lot of money, and he wanted to give some to the school. But he wanted to make sure that the school was worthy of it. I mean, it was a very interesting thing. And in the end, he gave about $3.5 million. It was our first really big donation. And it was given on condition that it wasn't used for sport. Because he despised the jock culture, the sporting culture of the school. They used to make them play cricket. And he would stand at third man and watch the birds and the flowers, and then the ball would come and everybody would shout at him. He told us those stories. So if you can get a Mr. Birch to come back. So Herman Charles Bosman, I referred to him earlier. He came back. It is interesting. So there's this idea, I think, that you want to come back and look at your roots, even if they were not the happiest time. And even though they were not your happiest time, you might give us $3.5 million because you're actually really deep down proud of being a Jeppe boy.
Well, I think that's the biggest change that I've seen, certainly from my years. I'm not sure what it was like for you, Chad, but the cultural side of Jeppe was almost looked down on, and there was no space. You had to carve out your own way if you wanted to go and be much more cultural. Which was sad in a sense. Now you look at most of these rugby players, their first scroll on their badge is academics. It certainly wasn't the case. I'm not saying that. I'm not generalising, but it definitely has shifted. And certainly the encouragement from Dale and his administration now is that there's an art class, there's an innovation centre. The cultural and academic side of it is getting so much more focus, which is making for a much better, well-rounded Jeppe boy, which I don't necessarily think that it was the case in those days. I think that there's certainly much more place now to find yourself, as opposed to just being pigeonholed.
Yeah, and I think the cultural side went through phases. It depended a lot on masters and their contributions at the time. So Dan Swat, he was a master here when I was there, and he was outstanding in the art department. But he also ran incredible dramatic productions. So we had outstanding things, and the new stage of the new hall at that time. My father-in-law ran a choir that rivaled the Drakensberg choir. It went on tours, so it came and went, but that's what's because of his particular interest and skill in music. So I don't think it was a consistent reputation in the cultural field like Jeppe Girls has with their choir is always magnificent. But I think culturally at the moment the school is also in a very good space. They've got a senior staff member running culture. We didn't used to even think about that. And although there were house plays and there were debates and there were things that it wasn't at nearly as high a level, And I think one of the things that was, I think, a worthwhile innovation was the so-called white blazer that became a black blazer, that you had to get full colours in 3 disciplines in order to qualify for that blazer. And that's become a thing that boys have aspired to. So you had to have it for sport, you had to have it for cultural activity, and you had to have it for academics. And it's pleasing to see that that's still going and that there's still people who are striving for it and getting it. That's the all-rounder you're looking for, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I think that we spoke, you mentioned it at the beginning, not necessarily super achievement in all 3 facets, but it's a kid who gets exposure to all of that. I'd often classify myself, like you, as the best 13 player of any sport because I was the ultimate polyfiller. I used to be at Cecily and, 13 tennis didn't have I went to go to St. John's and played tennis and got Oros and a couple of Mori biscuits, and that was an outing. But, I guess there's got to be a place for every kid, whether you are achieving full colours, half colours or no colours. And I suppose that's what, as you were talking about it, we often refer to Jeppe as it. It gives us this, it gives us that, and that's where you were referring to, this fabled thing. I don't know any other schools that refer to their school in such a tangible fashion. And it's not everybody, but I mean, I guess that's the mystique of what we've got here, and which is exactly why, as we started, to preserve these types of stories, which is so special for us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, sir. It's been an absolute honor to sit down and hear from you today, and also just speaking to the stories. I think, when I was at Jeppe, we had a boy who got an honours blazer, and the sport that he got an honours blazer for was orienteering. And as much as you think the reception in the hall would be a certain way, it wasn't. Everyone stood up for him, everyone clapped. Yeah. And I think that speaks volumes to what the school is achieving. So thank you for your effort in helping us.
Thank you. Okay.